Okay, Brian Bresee.
Hey, Sam.
So Brian Bresee is a good friend of mine. We met in January. He is a prime reason why this cause is so important. So Brian, he drove all the way up here from Las Vegas to participate. I know where you're at. So get this. I have been told, Sam, talk slower, have some pauses. There's a pause. There's a pause. You don't have to fill every second. So I know that you are from Las Vegas. No, you didn't have to prompt me. I'm doing my thing of the pauses. Okay, Brian.
Thank you for having me today, Sam. Your work is so important. And for me, I know in the most painful way just how important your message is. And you ask, well, how could Brian know that? And truthfully, I paid the ultimate price of what your work is about. I did indeed lose a son to suicide. When it happened, I had no idea why he made that end-of-life decision. And it put me on a search to try to understand his decision. The very next day after his death, I went researching, trying to understand what prompted him to make that decision. And one of the things I came across was an article by Thinker of Thoughts on the Kip Eliason story. If everybody out there, write that name down and Google that. Kip Eliason. And what that story is about is this is all the way back in the 80s, that a young man, he was going to bishop's interviews, and it brought an immense self-loathing upon him. And he ended up going to a therapist in this process as well, because it was damaging his mental health, these bishop's interviews were. And eventually, this young man, this is all the way back in, I believe, 82, went on to end his own life. And truthfully, if you go and you read that article, it'll tell you really what this is about even to this day, why the church is so resistant to act on this request and this need, this, for me, a demand. The church got sued over Kip Eliason's suicide due to masturbation questions, and so did the therapist in this situation. This is sent a message to the church leaders. They don't want to get sued. It's extremely important to them. In that court case, the therapist indeed lost the case because he knew better. He's a mental health professional. He knew that these types of questions are dangerous for children. The church, on the other hand, the only reason they escaped damages is because a bishop doesn't know better. So the church has known since the early 80s that these interviews are dangerous. After reading this article, I knew right away that this issue had affected my son's end-of-life decision. I placed it in the top 3 reasons. If you want to know what another one is, it was bullying at church was another a top reason, but this isn't the top 3. I know this was corrosive to my son's mental health, and to my shame as a father, about 1 month before his end-of-life decision, we were in the bishop's office, and it was time for him to get a bishop's interview. And I prodded my son, and I told him, just get it done, just do it, it's no big deal. And you might call that coerced him into doing it. And now I have to live with that for the rest of my life. You know, people ask, well, what kind of family does this happen in? We were active in the church my entire life, my entire adult life. I've always had a calling, temple recommend, paid my tithing, went to church every week, served. This isn't some This doesn't happen to just people in bad families. So for you out there sitting on the fence on this and you think it's not going to happen to you, and there is several that are suggesting, oh, this hasn't happened to me, so why should I care? You know, you could maybe say the same thing about me before my son made his end-of-life decision. It matters. You need to be concerned because it will happen to you. I have 3 messages for 3 parties in the church, and then I'll finish up. One is for the mental health professionals working for the church, LDS Family Services, and those advising church leaders. You know that these interviews are dangerous, yet you stand by them. This is immoral. You are a professional. You know these interviews are dangerous, but yet you take a paycheck and you take the comfort of church membership ahead of doing what your professional training tells you, which is to do no harm. You choose comfort and money over the safety, mental health, and lives of children. You will not be held blameless before God.
Yeah.
And I am tired for you who are too afraid, you mental health professionals who are too afraid to speak. I am tired of church leaders silencing you. Even recently, a BYU psychologist wrote a full article on how dangerous these bishop interviews are. Within 2 or 3 days, he was forced to remove that article. Why are you silencing mental health professionals? My second message is for church attorneys. You know exactly what you're doing here. You know exactly what you're doing here. The only pass you get is that it's an attorney's job to give the best legal advice. And it is a client's job to place their moral values on your legal advice. Church leaders are not placing moral values on your legal advice. They are hiding behind your legal advice. And children, my son being one, are dying as a result. Church attorneys, do you believe that you'll be held blameless? You believe you're just doing your job by giving the best legal advice? I know that's your job. But when children are dying and suffering because of your legal advice that church leaders are following, you will be held accountable in the next life before God. Now, my third message is to church leaders. Stop hiding behind the advice of attorneys and do the moral thing. You know exactly where the foundation of your policies are coming from. They're coming from the Kip Ellison story. You were sued. You knew that the church bishops are not trained. You know that they don't have the understanding to do no harm. That is what a mental health professional is instructed to do. You know a bishop does not have that knowledge on how not to do no harm since the 80s. But yet you continue to send these bishops into bishops' interviews to at times do harm. That is immoral. And now you are refusing to change policy because to do so is an acknowledgement of just how much harm these interviews have caused. So now you're going to place money, the love of money, ahead of the safety and lives of children. I've paid the price for your immoral decisions. It's not acceptable. And for you parents out there who are on the fence on this, you think it's not going to be you, your child? It will be your child. And one more thing in finishing. You know, the children most affected by these bishops' interviews are the ones that are not comfortable lying. You know that you lied. How many of you out there have lied to your bishop during a bishop's interview?
I lied.
That's right. You did, didn't you?
I lied.
I know who else here lied. Yeah. You know you lied. And you're lying right now if you're not admitting it. We are teaching our children to lie. The medicine is more dangerous than the illness. We're teaching our children to lie, and the children who lie easily are not affected by these bishops' interviews. But children like my son, very conscientious and very uncomfortable with lying, those are the ones that are most affected. You're damaging our children. You're teaching a culture of lying with these bishops' interviews. You're damaging the mental health. And the worst case scenario, children are dying. Please help Sam Young. Think about this and go and please read the Kip Ellison story to get a better understanding. I thank you for having me today, Sam.
Well, thank you very much. A powerful and poignant message. You know, none of us can even imagine the pain that you and your wife have gone through in losing a child in this manner. I know, I can remember the day that you told me that you felt regret that you had supported your child going in all alone.
I made him go in and do the interview.
Yeah.
I made him.
Yeah. And here we have parents all across the world that are doing the same thing you did with the same risk. How many of them are going to regret that they ever did that? Now,
you know, the difference between me, I made a huge mistake in making my son go do that interview. But I did that mistake in ignorance. I was an ignorant father, and truthfully, I have suffered so much in shame and guilt, my own guilt of regret that I did that, and I know that I contributed to his end of life decision by making him do that interview. He didn't want to do it. He was resisting. Church leaders and church attorneys know exactly what they're doing. They know the damage. They're doing this not in ignorance. They're doing it with their eyes wide open, and they're making a decision because of liability concerns, and some might suggest their egos, because they could never lead the church astray, you know.
okay. Now, I would like you to stay here for a minute because I would like to see if there are any questions for Brian.
Sure, I'll answer any question. There's no question off limits. Please ask me any question. I'm willing to defend this. I have a suicide note that he was full of shame and self-loathing, but also harm from the abuse of bullying that occurred at the church. I also have chat logs in the days before his death where he's feeling shame and he's saying he's feeling wicked and he's feeling evil, he's feeling bad. And I took a private investigator to investigate his computer, to investigate what happened. He was clean. His autopsy came back clean of drugs. His computer came back clean of any pornography, anything inappropriate. So what was all this evil and shame for my son? He was an innocent child coming from. For me, in my heart, I think the Kip Ellison story tells the story of why my son made the shame, along with the abuse of bullying that he experienced at our new ward. Those two things. His dying wish in his suicide note would be that our family would leave the church. That was his dying wish. That was his dying wish, that our family would leave the church. It is the self-loathing and the shame and the abuse. The church needs to change policy. They need to do it before another child dies. The suicide rate in Utah is at 4 times the national average. You have a very serious teen suicide problem in Utah. And let's not pretend it's the high altitude of Utah, because that has not changed. There is something going on in Utah increasing the teen suicide rate. And just a note, with the internet, kids have more access to pornography. They have more opportunities to possibly masturbate or do something else. Because the pornography is everywhere with the internet. This is contributing. And then they have to go talk to a bishop and lie, right? Or not take the sacrament and be ashamed. These two things combined, the internet and these bishops' interviews, are a deadly mix for children. Utah has a serious suicide rate. Please take a look. By the way, here's a picture of my son. I wanted to share that with you.
Please show that, yes.
He was a wonderful son to me. He was compassionate. I loved my son, and that's why it hurt so bad. I laid in bed for over a year after he died. And trust me, I did so much research on this issue and abuse. And I had to pick one. If I didn't pick the bullying issue in the church, I would have been doing I knew those two issues, bullying and these bishops' interviews. I had to ponder which one. I had to pick which one, but God knew that Sam Young was coming to do the other one. So he sent me on the abuse. The church has a very serious abuse. Talked to McKenna, they covered this stuff up. They covered up my son's abuse. They to this day have not investigated it. Church has a very serious problem, and it's at the heart of attorneys. But here's his picture, a wonderful son to me.
Thank you very much.
Sam, could you have us look? Please ask any question. I'm open.
What was that?
Can you show us a picture?
Yeah, let's show
Yes. Please ask any question. I'm willing to answer any question. Anybody has a question, there's nothing off limits.
Now,
Nothing's
before we
going to
get
hurt
to
my
the
feelings.
questions, I want to make one statement here.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, you have given me a new word. Immoral. The policies that we have are immoral in every single other church. Immoral. It is immoral in our church. I'm going to start calling what we're doing as immoral. It's not just a policy. It's not just an inappropriate policy. It's not just an irresponsible policy. It is an immoral policy. The leadership now knows if they were ignorant before our march, they have to know today. The evidence is in their hands of the immorality that we have been perpetrating on our children for decades. We're going to be putting a new number up on the board here shortly, moving it to 14, from 14 to 15. 14 days I've been fasting. 14 days you have been, friends of our children have been spotlighting what we're doing. But unfortunately, we've continued to go 14 days with immorality being foisted upon our children, an immoral policy that results in Brian's child is not the only child that has died by suicide. He is not alone. I wish he was alone. But many children have died by suicide because of our immoral policies that we're prosecuting with children behind closed doors. Okay.
Did you read that article? I'm hearing about an article where they're saying that I'm not exactly sure but like half of the suicides, something that was related to masturbation questioning. Maybe somebody can answer.
Okay.
They have the greater details on that.
Yes, and I'll go over that, mention that here. Yeah, I'll mention that here in just a sec. But let's take any questions that are from the audience or from anybody here that has questions.
You've had two interesting comments and questions so far that I'd like to point out.
Sure.
A bishop.
Here, let's do this.
A bishop told one of our viewers not to report the abuse that happened to her, just in case she was wrong, so she didn't ruin her perpetrator's reputation.
Yes. You know what? Obviously, it's not a bishop's interview for me directly, but for my son, I did take the abuse of my son to our stake president and asked him to address it. I had witnesses. He actually was not the first victim of these perpetrators. There was other witnesses. And also, I have chat logs and a suicide note that give clear evidence. And when I asked the stake president to address this, he became angry with me. And this is a quote now. He said, "This might be the natural man in me, but I don't want to be told what to do." And he followed that up with, "Brother Bresee, you need to go get some therapy." And that wasn't a suggestion in love. That was a suggestion for me to shut up. And so later on, they were harsh. And there's all kinds of stories to this. I could go on truthfully for the rest of the show telling you details. But I will tell you this. I had someone from leadership in our ward came to my house, and I asked him why they're treating me our family so roughly. Why are they being so rough? And he told me, because you're a liability concern to the church. This is what I was told. And truthfully, I went on to ask, several leaders in the church about this, and not one person has denied that the reason they covered up the abuse that led to my son's end-of-life decision is because of liability concerns. This is ugly. Children are dying because of your liability concerns, church leaders. You have another question for me?
A comment from one of our viewers. He says, I also regret that I was the person who did the interviews as a leader. It's one of the greatest regrets in my life.
Do you want to know the truth? I forgive all the bishops because they're like me. I made my son go do this interview. Did I not? I'm guilty, right? I added to that suffering. Most of our bishops are ignorant about this subject. They just don't know. And the truth is, they're not mental health professionals either. They don't know that they're doing damage. That's the number one rule of mental health profession, is to do no harm. But how does a bishop know to not do no harm? He doesn't even know he's doing harm. So I forgive the bishops. I love the bishops that served our family. I still love them. They're good men. They made a mistake, as I made a mistake. Where the fault on this lies, I've already mentioned 3 places. One is mental health professionals working for the church. They're tolerating this under their watch. LDS Family Services being one. 2, LDS attorneys know that the church has been sued, and the only reason that they did not lose is because bishops don't know what they're doing. And 3, the biggest blame I put right on the shoulders of church leaders at the highest levels. That is where the blame. And the reality is, the children that hurt my son, I forgive them as well. If you're out there, you know what you did. You know what you did to my son, and I forgive you. But what I don't forgive is church leaders that do nothing to protect children in the form of policy because of liability concerns. Yes.
Okay, another question? Sure.
There was something you said that really stuck out to me.
Yes.
You said that your son was unable to lie. I am a person on the autistic spectrum, and I was wondering if that was something that he was as well, or how his not feeling able to lie manifested, because that was something that happened with me too, is that I was drug into those interviews and felt like I couldn't lie because I just simply wasn't capable of doing so.
Well, you're questioning my son, where he was. My son did have some anxiety in his life. I've had anxiety in my whole life. I don't know how that would affect the ability to lie or not. This is not my field of expertise on what would cause a child to not lie or want to lie, but I know for me, I'm not a person comfortable with lying. I know these bishop interviews harmed me growing up as well. You think I would have been smart enough to know it wasn't good for my son, but it's so ingrained in our culture to do these interviews that it's just, we're Mormon family, right? I'm 7 generations. It's our culture. We just do them. They hurt me. They harmed me, but I just could not somehow connect that they would hurt my son as well. But I knew that he would not lie easily, and they would have hurt him. But as far as the mental health, how that would affect, I just can't answer that because this is not my field of expertise. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Now, do we have anybody else that wanted to say anything tonight? Okay, there's 2 of you. Okay. Now, first of all, Brian, I love you, my friend. Thank you. I know you're a hurting person. That this wound, I don't know how it is healed, but you have stood up to help others heal. So thank you very much.
I've had a moral obligation to stand up and heal. And I've got to tell you, coming to your march in last March, and even being here today is part of my therapy. It has helped me to heal. You have helped me to heal. Your efforts in your march. So I thank you for that. And I knew I had to say something, because if I didn't say something here, it's the same as what was not said to protect my son. It would be me not protecting my own son by proxy. So thank you.
So thank you, my friend.
Yes, thank you.
I look forward to hearing from you on Sunday.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Love you too, Sam. Yes.